Wisdom channel. I'm Dr. Crystal Nix, chiropractor and certified acupuncturist, and we're actually continuing the series that we began last year related to helping with natural support for seasonal symptoms. So if you remember from that video, we were talking about how the elements in Chinese medicine relate with the different seasons of the year. So now we're in the winter season, and the element that's associated with winter is water. So with each of the different elements, there are different kind of emotional imbalances that are common that happen with each of the different elements. So as well as physical symptoms. So there's usually emotional symptoms as well as physical symptoms. We're going to do a two-part series video on this. And right now we're just going to focus on the emotional symptoms. The next video we'll talk about physical symptoms and some remedies for that. So here what we're going to talk about are more of the emotional imbalances that can come up during the winter season in particular. So if we're at the beginning of the year, or it's just winter and we're dealing with maybe a little bit of a kind of a funk with the weather, or that just feeling kind of cold, oftentimes the emotions that start to arise that can feel like there's just this imbalance in us show up in two main types of emotional categories, we'll call it. So one tends to be called paralyzed will. The other is in fear. They both go hand in hand. And we'll kind of talk about both of them and how they might show up. And if they do show up, then you can be able to understand, all right, this is normal for this season, and now I can be able to just embrace that and move with it. And if it doesn't show up, that's just fine. That's great. You're actually living in more of a balanced state. So the hope here is to restore balance. So with paralyzed will, this is where we might feel like we're really trying to fulfill some sort of hope or desire. Maybe it's a New Year's resolution. Maybe it's just to feel like we've got some sort of control in our lives, or maybe it's a mindset shift of like just feeling paralyzed or even paranoid about certain things that might be out of our control. So that's more of the paralyzed will description. And then there's the fear side. So fear, it can just come up in the form of worry or concern, or it could actually be specific things like feeling afraid of not performing and not being able to complete things in the deadline that you hope, or fear of loss in a relationship. These sorts of things might come up. So sometimes the winter and the cold can kind of surface these things. Think of paralyzed. It's really frigid, and it's kind of like we feel maybe like our voice might be trapped. Those types of sensations. So if that's going on for you, just know for at least this winter season, this is a very common thing. So we're going to now work towards being able to balance out a little bit. So there's a wonderful saying by an anonymous author that it's our weaknesses are our strengths overdone. Let's say it again. So our weaknesses are our strengths overdone. So paralyzed will and fear are actually, so they might be seen as weaknesses, but it's a strength overdone. So let's kind of move into them and see what might be there. So think of the opportunity that paralyzed will actually allows for us. It kind of forces us to stop. So what could be the good there? It actually is the stillness. The stillness we might actually need in this season. And if you look at nature, you look at animals, they go into hibernation. You look at the trees, they shed their leaves, and they look like they're just dormant, maybe even dead, but they are actually nourishing themselves, they're focused inwards, and they're not focused on the external show and the external fruitfulness. They're really turning in and focusing on themselves in order to keep themselves stronger and replenished for when it is fruit-bearing season. So think of this beautiful application for this season of winter, that you get to be able to, instead of be forced into stillness and forced into paralysis, maybe choosing some stillness and choosing some time to pause and reflect on what is it that might be creating this this fear, or what is it that feels so out of control. As we start to actually put texture behind the things that are out of control and that seem like they're just so overwhelming, but if we start to pull out strand by strand, this huge knotted, gnarled up thing begins to have order. We start to see, okay, here's the knot here. That really is at the core of this, so I can begin to gradually unravel that. And we can be able to work with it and have some sort of organization with it. So just taking time to have stillness and asking yourself, one, where am I feeling this? Where am I feeling this sense of fear or paralysis in me? Is it in my throat? Am I feeling this voice that I can't have come up? Is it in my stomach and I'm just feeling this, this lump and this kind of hardness there? Is it in my joints? That's actually what we're going to talk about in the next video with this winter series. But it can show up in a different way, in a few different ways. So start with checking in to feel where is it sitting? And from there, maybe even asking, okay, where does it tend to show up? What triggers this feeling for me? Is it in my pursuit for a work type of dream that we have? Is it showing up more in relationships and just feeling like there's either something lacking or something that needs some resolution? Take time to actually begin to identify those strands, and gradually you can begin within that stillness to work on untangling that and just sitting with it and receiving more answers. It is a time where we can now shift. So as opposed to fear, now we'll talk about what can be the counter to that. And this is part of what you can do in that stillness. Fear in its higher form, and its is faith. So if we think of faith, when we're just completely lacking faith, it's usually when we are experiencing the most fear. And the opposite is true, is when we have faith, then we can be able to experience diminished fear. We might still have some concerns and worries, but we have certain truths that we know. So this is not about any sort of religion. So if you are religious, that's great. If you're not religious, that's great too. This is about knowing your truths. So in college, my girlfriends and I, we would talk about when we would just be freaking out about life or boyfriends or diets and things like that. We would go back to asking each other, okay, what is my truth here? And we would pause and remember, okay, there are a few different things that could come up. One that if anyone can maybe practice is recognizing like the truth that we can find in matter. So like in an atom, for example, every atom has both negative and positive components to it, right? It has the protons and the electrons and the neutrons in it to balance it out. So in every negative moment, we can have faith that there are some positive parts here. And it's my opportunity to be able to find them and name them and appreciate them and root in them. That is an option. One thing that I found for myself is For example, how that the law of with matter again is that matter is neither created nor destroyed. That actually really helped me at the beginning of when COVID had first started and we were concerned for our small business and everything. I paused and I asked myself, okay, I'm experiencing fear. I'm starting to experience some paralyzed will of like, I don't even know where to move on this. And instead chose stillness and asked myself, what do I know? What is true? What are truths that I can stand on? And one thing that I came back to was this: matter is neither created nor destroyed. So as much abundance that was there before COVID, in this case, is there after and during COVID. So for me, I was able to just take root knowing, okay, it might shift around, but it's still there. So these are some ideas of what you can maybe ruminate on, meditate on, and be still in during this winter season. So enjoy some stillness and enjoy some moments to consider, what are your truths? What do you have faith in that can help you in this, whatever the tangled knot is that you've been dealing with of fear or paralysis, and be able to feel like you can breathe and have a productive and peaceful season. So we'll next go into the series within this water element related to the physical symptoms, and we'll talk about specific herbs as well as some acupressure points to be able to work on to help with these emotional things as well as some of the physical symptoms during the winter season. I'll see you in the next video.